It is Friday, February 18th. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back. It's of course a very big day today because not only do we have the Uncharted movie now being widely available here in North America, where it was screening a few days earlier in Europe, but we also have Horizon Forbidden West launching today. So a lot going on in the world of PlayStation. First up though, as always, our PS Plus reminder. So make sure you grab those February games before they go away. Now with that said, let's actually talk about Horizon because the game is now finally available, and this is where we can talk about, well first, the reviews, right? So on Metacritic across 100 different publications, an 89 overall. Very good. Obviously that's fantastic. Congratulations to Guerrilla Games, and actually that is very close to the first game where it got, I think, 90 or 89 as well. The same score. It's very close. And probably also a good time to mention here, because certainly this discourse comes up every single time we have a major release come out, and whether it's, you know, below 90, a little bit above 90, every single time it happens. And I know some people, they do like to get excited about seeing their favorite project or upcoming project get to like a really high score and seeing, you know, 94, 95. I get it, but you can't get too hung up on a game or any piece of content across whatever medium when it gets, you know, anything below 90, right? I don't know why people tend to get so fixated on that. I mean, oftentimes it doesn't matter what it is. It's very hard to really hit that 90 to 95 plus range or above 95 when it comes to just the simple reality that people do have different opinions. So something can only be so good until, you know, somebody says, well, hold on a second, for me it was, you know, this, that, and the other, right? It happens, right? So whether there was foul play with certain publications or not, let's not get too stir crazy or hung up on that. 89, a very good score. At a certain point, like above 85, it's just, you know that it's well received across most publications, and that's what's important. Now, let's actually move on to the upgrade process. So just as a fair warning once again, because this was also highly publicized prior to the game coming out, and for good reason. It's something where we talked about it when Sony reversed their decision to actually honor the free upgrade path from PS4 to PS5, which is good, but the problem here is that Sony is being a bit deceptive in terms of making sure that info is widely available. And at the time I said, like, oh, I think Sony will probably just readjust pricing, because at that point, why would consumers not just buy the PS4 version to circumvent paying an extra $10? Well, obviously that wasn't the case, because we do have to do a warning here. If you didn't buy the game just yet, then you know, be aware of this, because well, first up, I mean, like me, and I'm sure a lot of you, you want to go to the store or have it ordered where it's a PS5 disc, PS5 box art, throw it on your shelf. You know, that's all well and good. That's what I'm going to do. I know a lot of you are going to do that, but if you don't care about that in particular, then yes, buy the PS4 version if you don't want to spend the extra 10-something dollars. Buy a PS4 disc, that's a free upgrade. On the PS5 PlayStation Store, much different story. Here's where it's a bit deceptive. So you can't actually see or choose to buy the PS4 version from PS5. We've seen Sony do this a lot when it comes to certain content items that they do or do not display, depending on where you're actually looking for it. So on PS5, you can't see it. You can buy the PS4 digital version on the PlayStation Store on desktop or on mobile. Do it that way, and then when you go to your PS5, you are going to be granted that free PS5 version. So if you don't care, by all means, that's how you should go about doing that. And if you want to spend the $70 full price because you want to support Guerrilla, that's fine too. But just be aware that you know, they're doing it in such a way where it's not, unless you knew about this, you would end up paying the extra money without realizing that you could have actually saved it instead. Now, when it comes to the game's overall performance and, say, the differences between the PS4 and PS5 versions, this is where I would recommend watching Digital Foundry's full video on this, where it's like 25-30 minutes long, very deep dive into, you know, their typical deep dive onto these topics, but we'll do a quick summary here. So in terms of the actual performance, you can see across the board, base PS4 is confirmed to be a dynamic 1080p at 30 FPS. PS4 Pro is a dynamic checkerboard 1800p at 30 FPS. PS5 resolution mode is native 4K at 30 FPS, and PS5 performance mode is checkerboard 1800p at 60 FPS. The main visual differences you will see, they appear somewhat obvious, of course, but PS5 is just much denser when it comes to the foliage and certain objects actually being present versus, you know, them missing on the PS4 version, or the moss layer that's added. There's just a lot more on screen going on, where from a visual identifier you can pretty much tell right away that that is the core difference, outside of, say, just resolution and frame rate. But it's still very impressive what they were able to accomplish on PS4, and that's something where the game's director actually talked about this a little bit when it came to making sure that they can get the most they can out of PS4, but still making a unique identifier between the two versions, where, okay, if you're playing on PS5, here is where it looks remarkably beautiful and gorgeous. And, you know, by and large, the game does look absolutely just nutty, right? It's just one of those things where it's kind of the same wow factor I had going through the Demon's Souls remake, because that is one of the very few games, that and Ratchet & Clank, where if you want the true next-gen visual flair, right, or in this case current-gen, but, you know, most people still don't have these new consoles. Either way, it's just, if you want that real wow factor, this is one of those games where on PS5 it does look that good. So it really is incredible to see what Guerrilla has been able to pull off, and they have been a developer in Sony's first party that has had that repertoire of being one of the more visual developers, where they can really extract a lot out of the hardware and make something just that is a feast for the eyes. Now, a really cool initiative that Sony recently announced is the Play and Plant program, and this is just, it's so cool what they're doing here. So Sony is collaborating with the Arbor Day Foundation, and so every single time a player earns the Reach the Daunt trophy in Horizon Forbidden West, which is it's a story mode trophy, so you'll probably get it naturally after, like, 2 hours or something. But Sony will plant a tree in 3 deforested areas in the U.S. That would be the Douglas County Forest, Sheepfire Private Lands, and also the Toria State Park. And so this will happen no matter what. And really, it's kind of cool that they chose a story mode trophy, which is so early in the game. So you don't even really have to be mindful of this or go out of your way for it. It's just something where naturally, millions of players are going to probably earn this trophy, meaning that Sony will plant, millions upon millions of trees, which is, that's great. I mean, I love when multi-billion-dollar companies actually do a little something and give back and have these little programs. So yeah, it's not like amazing or mind-blowing or, really changing the world, but players were going to play that far into the game anyway, so at a minimum we can see some good out of it. It's just really cool, and at least for this initiative, in the context of Horizon and what's going on in that universe, it fits quite well. Now also, one really cool thing that was announced alongside all this other stuff is a new Lego set for Horizon with the Tallneck. And I looked at this and I was like, okay, well, that's an instant cop for sure. But, I love Legos. I really do. I'm sure a lot of grown adults love Legos, and I guess it appeals to children. But, at like $70 to $80 for certain sets, sometimes it's like $200, $300, $400. I like Legos, but there's never really an IP that appeals to me too much, right? Do I really want to drop, $100 on like a Jurassic Park, type thing, or like, I don't care about Star Wars. They do a lot of Star Wars. Sometimes they do that architecture set, which I guess that's cool, but like, again, do I want to drop that kind of cash? If we're getting into PlayStation IP, then all right, I guess I'm going to start buying some Legos, and I'm kind of okay with that. Now, all that being said, the game is now available, so I say this most times with major releases, but I do mean it. If you're buying the game today and playing it, really, have a great time, have some fun. I know it's something where you can't wait to either get home from work, or you took the weekend off and you're just excited to, get lost in that world. I'm with you, so, I can't wait to be done filming this and editing this video so I can start playing it too. So, absolutely, have a good time. For our next news story, we've got a rumor here from the Twitter account NGT. That's what it's called. This is the Twitter profile that had put out information before about Quantic Dream's projects, and they got it correct about the Star Wars Eclipse project. So that's why we're humoring this one here, but they recently put out a tweet this past week where they say, and I quote here, from what I've heard from several separate sources, in addition to their new games, Supermassive Games is reportedly working on a remake of Until Dawn for some time that will be coming to current-gen consoles. I will try to find out more about this potential project. And that's all they really say about this, which that's interesting. They say current-gen consoles. Until Dawn is a PlayStation-owned property, so Sony contracted out Supermassive to make that game, and actually, if you remember, a long time ago, that was supposed to be a PlayStation 3 Move-based project. and it was dormant for a long time. We thought it was vaporware, and then it came back on PS4, just standard controls. But it was actually a really great game, and it also really surprised Sony in terms of the commercial reception, the commercial and the critical reception. Across the board, they were quite pleased with that particular project. But it is a property they own, so current-gen consoles, the wording's a bit weird there, because either Supermassive, got the IP back, which I don't think Sony would want to, sell it back to begin with, because it was a successful game. So they don't, I don't think they'd be willing to do that. But either that happened, or they're referring to PS4, 5, possibly publishing on PC. But they said console, so I don't really know. But we'll watch this rumor. Keep in mind, Supermassive wanted to, because one would figure that why didn't Sony lock them down for more games, because Until Dawn was successful, but Supermassive wanted to go on their own and do an anthology of games and tell a bunch of these, not micro stories, but smaller contained stories that are different from one another, and that's what we know today is the Dark Pictures anthology, where they ship those everywhere. That's what they wanted to do, and so they're doing that currently. But yeah, a little weird, especially for Until Dawn, where it doesn't really need it. But if they want to ship a native PS5 version and add more visual bells and whistles, then I guess that would be cool. But we'll see. We'll watch this rumor and see how it plays out. All right, let's finally talk about that Uncharted movie, because it's finally here, and this really is kind of a historic day when you think about it, because this movie was announced 10 something years ago, back in the 2010s, when so many video game adaptations were announced. And that was a decade ago, and they've been in video game movie purgatory since then. And Uncharted did make it out of there. Now, whether you like the result that came out is a different story, but let's start with the first thing, which is this is the first major PlayStation Productions release, and with that we saw the new typical movie intro, the studio intro, which it's kind of similar to the regular PS Studios intro for the games, but this one we can see it's the same swoopy blues, and it's kind of a dark setting. We can see some iconic PlayStation characters: Aloy, Kratos, Jin Sakai, Astro, also Joel and Ellie. So it's a very epic, cinematic-looking intro for PlayStation Productions, and you'll see this when you go see the movie, which I have not seen it just yet. So I know a lot of people finally got to watch it in Europe, or people saw it yesterday. I have my ticket booked, or I'm going to see it tomorrow. So I'm booked for Saturday, so that's when I'll finally see it. I wanted to try and see it sooner to talk about it here. Can't do that just yet, but we can say that for the reviews on Metacritic, or not Metacritic, Rotten Tomatoes, we've got 125 different reviews with a 39% rating, which honestly, I kind of expected that. Really, I didn't think it was going to get reviewed well. I did not think this was going to be like an amazing movie, but I didn't think it would be panned across the board. I felt like it was going to be like mediocre to maybe a little bit under mediocre, and I guess that is, I don't know, would you agree, 39%? That seems like the ballpark that I was expecting. But commercially, and this is where movies, it's so weird, right, where it seems to me that a lot of, poorly received movies or TV shows, they still are largely successful, and that's not always the case for games, where sometimes a game needs to be genuinely good to reach a huge audience and make a lot of money. Movies, not so much the case, and so, like with this, we're seeing that, at least Variety is reporting that the movie is off to a strong start. So these numbers are from Europe right now, so we don't have the full numbers when it comes to the wide release, but it opened at 21.5 million total at the box office, tracking above some Marvel films actually when you compare it directly to their theatrical release. So it's doing 21% better than Shang-Chi, 18% better than Black Widow, and 12% over The Eternals. So it seems like it's doing okay so far. And really, the movie it needs to be profitable, right? So if it does well in North America and everywhere else, if it recoups costs and it does, if it's highly profitable, I'm sure a sequel is guaranteed. I'm not really sure what the threshold is, in terms of how much spent versus how much it needs to make over that to really be considered, okay, should we try a sequel? Is a sequel worth it? A lot of movie studios will often, I know this, they throw a lot of things at the wall to see what sticks, and if one is just a huge knockout success, that can easily fund, a few a few that are commercial failures or just kind of broke even somewhere around there. So if this movie even does marginally well, I think it's in a pretty good position to possibly see more. And well, that's another thing that we saw is that a recent roundtable between Tom Holland, Asad Kizilbash, also Neil Druckmann, and of course the director Ruben Fleischer, where he mentioned if they did get to do a sequel, they would like to look at doing the car chase from Uncharted 4, which that's a pretty iconic scene from that game as well, where Drake's getting dragged around in the mud, you're going through all those little huts, and then he's it's that one bridge scene. It's just a really epic, larger than life, crazy cinematic fight and sequence that would be cool to explore in a movie. Honestly, it's perfect for an action flick, but yeah, it's interesting to see that. I mean, they probably had talks beforehand about, here's what may or may not happen depending on how well this film does. So it seems like there's already ideas in place of like, okay, here's what we would do for the sequel. And Tom seems genuinely happy and thrilled to be a part of it. So maybe if you did watch it already and you didn't like it, at the very least, he seems quite genuine with honoring source material and trying to replicate certain shots, which he talked about when it came to like picking up an item and flipping it over. And he said he wanted to do that shot in the movie. And so, Tom, I think, is coming from a really good place. I do. But I will, I'll see it tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll have a better discussion once we can, I'll probably talk about it next week or on Twitter or something. Now, as for The Last of Us HBO TV series, this was kind of expected, but sure enough, it's true. The show is coming out next year, not this year, so this was recently confirmed by The Hollywood Reporter based on a 20 question and answer with the HBO Max programming chief, Casey Bloys, where they confirmed that the show is still being shot right now. It's there's no date announced for when it's actually airing, and also just straight up, yes, it's not coming out this year. So yeah, we kind of knew that. If you remember, one of the first pieces of info that we got about the show was that they booked a lot of shooting dates up to at least summer of this year, which is pretty deep into the year. It seemed kind of obvious that, okay, this is probably going to be a show that's not going to come out until 2023. Probably the more curious question here is how they're going to align this with the alleged remake. And, I say alleged just to be careful, but it's more of an open secret. We're probably getting this Last of Us remake. It's more a matter of when. Do they really want to, is it necessary to have it right next to the show? Are they going to be diligent about making sure that the game aligns right next to the show? Or could we just see a formal, reveal of this game, say late 2022, so this year, and then it will come out next year, or maybe it gets announced and launches within the year? That's more what I'm curious about, which I would gather we'd probably at least see the game this year, and it'll come out close to when the show finally airs sometime in 2023. Moving on to our next story, this one is probably one of the bigger things that happened this past week, which was the stealth drop of Cyberpunk 2077 on PS5 and Series S and X. The current gen update finally here, free for current owners. Looks good, plays good. Also on PS5, if you've never played the game before, then there's a free trial for 5 hours, which, keep in mind, the timer starts when you hit download, not when you start the game, which is so dumb. But the point is, this past week that happened, and one story that came out of that was, and we've seen this before, but the PS4 to PS5 upgrade process, and it looks like there may have been some problems there, and then also some comparables are drawn immediately to, Xbox Smart Delivery, how it's so much more convenient and automated, and that's where it was highly publicized. So it's interesting because, a lot of the problems that Sony had with PS4 to PS5 have mostly been ironed out. I mean, the big one was definitely save files, because where a lot of this stems from is how Sony handles their games inherently, right? So every single game has a different, title ID, and that carries through with a PS4 and a PS5 game. They're considered separate. Different games, save files, even trophy lists, which this is different from when Sony did PS3 for Vita. Those are clearly all different title IDs, but they would allow developers to share, trophy lists across platforms where, you could have one list but 3 different games. Not the case here. So they're all, this is entirely separate. Microsoft, on the other hand, has, all those different games are considered, one executable. If it's the same game across generations, it can apply patches across, generations. It can accept a next-gen patch, basically, but it's essentially a Series X version or a Series S version. Same with the save files, and they automate that entire process. And it works quite well. I mean, this is something where even prior to launch, I was one of those people where it was like, oh, okay, so that's like a marketing term, because prior to launch, both console manufacturers were saying that, yes, there's free upgrades. We'll accommodate for publishers that want to do free, paid, whatever. They were both doing it. It's just that now that we have the consoles, Microsoft has automated the entire process, and it does work quite well. And that's why when this is publicized, it's coming off looking really bad on Sony's end, when generally speaking, it is a very simple, straightforward process, because it is. You put the disc in, your free upgrade is right on the menu. It's just a little bit more, it's more of a manual process, as in you have to, hit X a few times, or if you bought the game digitally, then you have to go to your library and hit download from there. And at least if you buy digitally, then you can, push the download from, say, mobile. Whereas one extra little convenient factor is that you can, preload anything on Xbox without paying for it, and just then you can get the download finished, go home, either pay for it or insert the disc that way, and then you can start playing right away. Where again, PlayStation, if you insert the disc, you have to start the download manually. It's a pain, but at least it's still a very simple, straightforward process. It appears that with this situation, though, the biggest problem that people are running into, because I'm not seeing many reports of people actually having this problem, which would make sense, is that if you are in a different territory, or if your disc is different compared to where your account region, where it was made, right? It's something where, and we've seen this for a long time, stretching back to PS3, if I'm not mistaken, where, as an example, you can't use a US disc and apply European DLC. It's always been like that for the longest time. Unfortunately, it's not really a common situation that people find themselves in, but if it happens, well, that's where you're going to run into a bad time. And that would hold true for this, where a PS4 disc from one region cannot claim a PS5 upgrade from a different region. And that might have been the major issue. It also looks like it depended on if you inserted the install disc or the play disc. It really depended on the CUSA code. And then also there might have been a save file issue, which it seems like that also is not too widespread, but that was actually the biggest problem Sony had with PS4 to PS5, was not having a proper SDK feature for developer support to make sure that a PS5 game can read PS4 save files more easily, right? Before it was developer dependent, where they had to, implement that feature. Now it's part of the SDK. PS5 game can read a PS4 save no problem, so for most people that's not going to be a problem. If you're going from PS4 hardware to PS5, then that would be a little bit more different, where if you don't have PlayStation Plus, then you can manually upload one save file from Cyberpunk 2077 on PS4, then pull it on PS5, and you can be sorted there. But still, most people wouldn't be in that situation if they say, well, not only if they had Plus, but if they recently bought a PS5, then chances are they imported all their content already by some method, whether it was from hard drive backup, the Ethernet thing, or you can do it over Wi-Fi. But that's also a way where your save file is already locally stored onto the system. But that's the big problem with PlayStation, is that it's not even really an issue depending on how you look at it, but it's a very automated process over on Xbox, whereas on PlayStation it's just a lot of manual stuff, which is simple, but if you're not privy to these things, then I could see how somebody could get tripped up and run into a problem, or a genuine issue where they do have to be ironed out. And it doesn't look good when these things happen, and then there's discourse online about just how bad it is, which it's not nearly as bad as it's made out to be, but unfortunately you have a competitor that has automated the entire process. And that's also a weird situation where it works great over there, but then there are certain circumstances on PlayStation where you actually want to be able to have that leverage and control of having a PS4 and PS5 version of the same game. It's not a common scenario, but some PS4 games have VR modes, whereas the PS5 one doesn't. Sometimes you want to trophy hunt the PS4 version. It's a little messy, but if you, again, are a little more privy to these things, then it's not nearly as difficult to work as some would imagine. But yeah, that happened this past week. Hopefully any remaining issues are sorted, but it's probably not going to change, right? I know people would maybe like to see it get better, but we're talking about a cross-generational thing on how Sony treats their own software. To fix this would be a massive overhaul of the system's UI and also the game licenses. That's not going to happen. If they try to attempt fixing it, by the time they have a solution, we're in a generation where it's strictly all PS5 software moving forward. So again, it's kind of annoying for the time being, but it probably won't be an issue once we have nothing but PS5 and Series S and X games and nothing else. Next up, it was recently announced by Nintendo that come March 2023, you will no longer be able to make purchases on the Wii U or 3DS eShops, which this news has kind of sparked some renewed interest in, PlayStation when they initially last year put out a notice that they were closing the stores on PSP, PS Vita, and PlayStation 3. You wouldn't be able to make new transactions in August and July, depending on the platform, which they then backtracked, which was good. They would now keep the stores open indefinitely, but there is a question of, okay, Nintendo is going through with it, and they'll probably go through with it. No matter how much heat is put onto them, they're more than likely not going to do anything about it, which is really unfortunate, but they're probably going to go through with it no problem, and that is more a question of looking back at Sony and going, okay, well, how long are you really going to keep those storefronts open? In particular, it goes into the conversation of digital preservation, game preservation, accessibility of these classic titles, and so what is Sony, going to do? Because realistically, it's good that we saw the credit card removal on those platforms, because that actually is a way to at least circumvent probably one of the biggest loopholes and security risks with keeping those old stores open. So while it's a hassle to fund your wallet, at least that proves that they have a short-term solution to keeping those stores open. But yeah, it will still come eventually that they will close it, and that will be when it's for good. It's just more a matter of how long are they really going to do that. And, well, the interesting thing that we can probably at least theorize here is that knowing that Spartacus, the way that it's sounding right now for this PlayStation service revamp, will include some, legacy software, and depending on how they go about doing that and how many games are available across PS1, PS2, possibly PSP, that might be one of the ways they can look at then shutting down the stores in, let's say, a year and a half, 2 years, which I would love for them to go at least another 2 years, but there's still a big problem concerning the CR2032 battery on PlayStation 3, where even if you do load up on a lot of classic digital PSN games and PS1, PS2 classics, if at some point you won't be able to authenticate with PSN, then those titles will become invalid when that CR2032 battery dies in your console, and that's a major issue as well. There's it's such a multifaceted conversation, which I think I'd like to explore in a separate video when it comes to the topic of preservation in these storefronts, but for now at least, we can say this is really more of a Nintendo thing, and let's just hope Sony's not really doing anything too crazy when it comes to their storefronts, because they did that was very recent that they said they would keep them open, so it's not like they're going to go down tomorrow, but I would hope we get at least a few years out of the PlayStation Store on Vita and PS3. Now, having said all that, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and now announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about with you all from this past week. Our Tuesday video was actually kind of a separate news story. I figured that would have been better to do as its own topic, but that was when Sony, it looks like they're censoring Martha is Dead on PS4 and PS5 in a certain way, so it depends on the context and the content. We don't know everything, but go check out that story to kind of hear the whole situation. And then, coming up, I don't know what I'm going to do here because I'm going to be probably very busy with Horizon. And I also didn't even finish Arceus just yet. I'm trying to get like 2-3 hours in per night on that, but you know how things go. So I don't know, we'll see. Also the Uncharted movie on Saturday, so yeah, I'm going to be busy. We'll see what happens on Tuesday, but that's it. That's all I've got for you. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Panecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.